Now 250,000. Now, but to get 275. High, but to get 275. 3. Now 300,000. Now 3 1/4. 325. High, but to get 3 1/4. But to get 325. Now half. Now, but to get 300.
And hello from Dallas at Lincoln Center at the intersection of the Dallas North Tollway and the LBJ Freeway. Welcome to the Mike Mcgavel Jones Show. We're glad to have you along today. We have a very special guest that I work with, and we have worked with this group previously, and it's been a great relationship and a great experience for me. I want to introduce Sabrina R. Porter. She is the president and CEO of Christian Care Communities and Services, and they have multiple locations. We'll talk about what they do. They are a Christian-based organization, and good morning.
Good morning.
Glad to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
As you know, I toured the facilities in the last week or so.
Yes.
And I've done that before, and I'm amazed at the changes that are going on. So what I'd like for you to do is tell them about your organization and a little bit about what, I'd say the base, just give us the overall 10,000-foot view, and then we'll get a little closer.
So not the 3-hour tour.
Not
okay.
the 3-hour
right.
tour like Gilligan's Island.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd love to. So in the 1900s, there was a small town of Gunther, Texas, that had some property, and the Churches of Christ, several elders and some ministers, got together, and they decided they wanted to start a Bible college. And so a Bible college was established, and there's much more history than just that. But since I won't do the 3-hour tour, I'll make it succinct. And for a few years that was done, and then they decided after a while that they had all this land, and they needed to utilize it for what they saw as one of the greatest needs, and that was to take care of the elderly. And so they established a nursing care center. That's what it was called back in the day. Actually, it was called Home for the Aged.
Home for the Aged.
And so we've come a long way, because that would mean you and I are aged, and we don't like to be referred to as old.
Only like fine wine.
That's right. And so it was established, and it was the only one for many years. And then about 40 years later, another one was built in Mesquite, Texas. And about 20 years later, one in Fort Worth. And about 4.5, 5 years ago, we broke ground and then opened up one in Allen. And so we have those 3 communities, and those communities are retirement for senior adults right now.
Right.
Our goal is to go intergenerational, but that means anywhere from independent living, homes and apartments, where these people who live in these homes and apartments travel. They still drive, they still do their own thing, but they have the luxury of having a home where they don't have to take care of the everyday things that break down, and they have the peace of mind knowing someone's there if they need something in an emergency. Because what's also in those communities are staff who help. So our teammates who are nursing, nurse aides, maintenance, across the board, chefs, and so they can utilize those services too. They can come to a big dining room and eat all of their meals, or they can cook something for themselves in their kitchens. And so that next step is, assisted living. And the assisted living has 2 aspects. One is traditional assisted living, where residents rely on us for some of the basics. For instance, we help them with their medication. We make all of their meals, but they can also stay in their apartments and have their own meal, and a lot of people want to do that. They want to have a breakfast in their apartment. Nobody wants to get up and get dressed early if they're in the Porter family, and so that's a luxury as well. That's a benefit. And then there's also another assisted living, and the memory care is what we refer to those neighborhoods, and that is where our residents who have some form of dementia, the Alzheimer's. People get Alzheimer's and dementia a little mixed up, but I refer to the dementia as kind of the umbrella. And then there's different types of dementia under that umbrella. And many years ago, a lady named Linda Morrison, who many of us who have been in this industry a long time respect and admire, she was walking down one of the halls one day in Gunter, Texas, and that was when residents sat in wheelchairs. They were dependent on the
And they
staff.
were treated that way.
And they were treated that way. And so their quality of life was... families didn't know to expect anything different because that's what you saw back in the early 1900s. And she walked around that community and she said, there's got to be a better way. And that's when she started training the staff, learning everything she could about Alzheimer's, and training our caregivers on several methods, what to do differently, and how to deal with certain levels of dementia. And so that's one of what we refer to as one of our specialties. We feel that we are experts in the care and service for our dementia residents. And that's something that we're very proud of because we're one of the first in the Texas area, in the DFW area, to establish dementia neighborhoods.
So the organization basically started, I guess, in the 40s?
The 1900s, early 1900s.
Earlier than that.
The Bible College was early 1900s.
Turn of the century.
The nursing care, mid 1900s.
So who ultimately was responsible for starting this?
So it was founded by the Churches of Christ, and a minister, Ralph Godfrey, was one of the first, and he is the one who. When I say Churches of Christ, there's people get those mixed up, but Churches of Christ are independent, so there's not a regional office or a corporate.
Or a mothership.
Yep,
they're independent.
They're independent, and that's who it was started by, were the Church of Christ ministers and elders, many members. In fact, the one in Mesquite, we didn't have independent living in the very beginning, and we rely on donations. We rely on our churches and individuals to contribute towards our ministry because we're faith-based.
Right.
Now, back then, you saw 100% of the residents and almost 100% of the staff, who we refer to as our teammates, who were Church of Christ. But over the years, with all of the options that are out there and people, this big melting pot of ours in the DFW area, it started to change the makeup of the population living in our communities. And so I would say in the late 1900s is when we decided that Gunther was something that we couldn't continue to operate. It was a hard decision. I wasn't around then, but it was a hard decision for our board, and they had to dissolve that. It was old. It had gotten older. It was hard to put capital into that building, and so we sold those properties, and the church that was established there remained. But the properties were sold and turned into residential neighborhoods.
Right.
And so that's when Mesquite became even bigger, and the independent, the assisted, and then the nursing care. And so it's skilled nursing. That's a mystery to a lot of people. They get that confused. They say Medicare, Medicaid, they think those are the same things, but they're not.
Right.
Medicare is when you go in, and that's paid for up to 100 days.
I gotcha.
Medicaid is for those people who need some financial assistance. And then there's that middle that a lot of people don't know about, And I call that the gap. That's for the teachers who didn't have a big retirement set aside, the ministers and their spouses, our veterans.
Sure.
And there's a gap of what it costs to take care of somebody 24/7.
Sure.
And what people can afford. And so that's why we rely on our friends to donate towards it.
Sure. You know, when I was young, growing up in North Texas, specifically in Gainesville, I remember I was reading my great-grandmother's death certificate, and it referred to the Gainesville Sanitarium. And people get confused about what that is. And so I certainly understand the situation in Gunter, because turn-of-the-century buildings, the metro areas are much easier to provide for than a rural community in the middle of nowhere.
Yes,
and, of course, Gunter's not in the middle of nowhere now, because as it continues to grow out, Frisco, Prosper, all that stuff, Gunter will get eaten up sooner or later, but it didn't happen soon enough for this organization. Of course, I've been involved with this group now, I think, about 5 or 6 years, maybe a year longer. I don't know. I know I've done it, conducted the Festival of Trees event, which we're going to talk a lot about here in a little while, because it's going to be coming up shortly, and I'll be conducting that auction and looking forward to it. But when I first signed on, and as most people know, in the fundraising space, I'm very proactive in visiting whoever I'm working for. So, you know, I like to have meetings. I like to know what's going on. Whatever the group is, whether it's challenged, mentally challenged children or adults, which I do a major event here in Dallas for a group. And, you know, I've been to the campus multiple times. It actually charges me up because I want to see it. And so I remember the first time I came to your residential neighborhood in Mesquite, which is between La Prada and what's the next?
Northwest Drive.
And Northwest Drive. I think there's a big Toyota dealership over there.
On your way
and
there.
It's right behind. That's how I always remember. If I pass the Toyota dealership, I've gone too far. But it's a very unique property. People just don't know. They just don't realize. Almost all of us during our lives are affected by either dementia or Alzheimer's. And personally, I'm pushing for legislation for more funding for those. You know, I'm a very outspoken person in Washington, and I like to lobby for certain things. And I just believe that, I mean, there's lots of causes. Lots of causes. I mean, there's tons. I mean, we could sit here for days and just read off the different organizations and causes. But I'm going to tell you, an aging population and a large population. And that population is aging in a different way now, more dramatically than I've ever seen before. We have friends in their 40s that are having problems with dementia or full-scale Alzheimer's. And you know, they keep trying to do the research, you know, and I do a lot of things with cancer and diabetes and feeding the country and feeding the world. And I mean, we do so many things. That's one thing great about Americans. We're very philanthropic. You know, we're one of the most philanthropic nations anywhere. And you can see that by the mission work that goes on. But I'm telling you, right here in our backyard, you know, we have relatives. One of my very best friends in the world, both of his parents fell to Alzheimer's, and they were farmers. They were just people out in the country. Then they moved to the city to kind of retire, and then his father could not really adequately take care of his mother. It was a really sad situation, and then, of course, he passed away, and then he had the same problems. And then then the family had to get involved. They didn't have solutions. They didn't know what to do,
right?
And they didn't want to institutionalize them. And there's
that word.
And that's the word. That's the word I don't like, because it's we know what that means. So when I went to it was called Christian Care at the time, And I do like the rebranding and the renaming because it makes more sense. It is a community, and it's all about communities and services.
Right.
And I'll just read your mission because I'll do that. Christian Care Communities and Services is a faith-based ministry providing innovative and loving care for those we serve. And then your vision is a better every day at every stage of life. Your value statement is we do life, all caps, together. And the values are love, integrity, faith, and excellence. And then the motto is caring is our calling. And when you go visit this campus, the one in Mesquite and Allen, which I just did, and I'm sure Fort Worth is the same, I have no doubt about that. What you see are really special people that meet you at the door or in the office. I know when I went to Allen the other day, it was a great tour. Of course, that's a very nice, relatively new campus.
Our newest one.
And so when you see the lifestyle and how it was put together, it makes all the sense in the world. So you have this area where people are aging. They want an independent life for as long as they can have it. And then they can do whatever they have their parking space and they have their, I'm telling you, I can't remember the young lady that gave us the tour. Karen and I agreed we could live there. I could live there very, very well and be very happy. And between the food service, I said, I saw the dining area, the dining experience, and I said, well, this looks like I'm at a Hilton property in the morning getting breakfast.
Because we have a chef. And
you've got a chef, important. And it doesn't look like what you would traditionally think of in a retirement community or assisted living. And so it was a very uplifting thing for me. And
Mike, the problem is that people really don't know what's done nowadays until they need it, until they're in a crisis. And they wait till they're in a crisis. And so what we do is we encourage people to go out and start walking these communities and meeting people before you need it, before your parents need it, and know what's out there, what your options are. And what you saw, and you said the word a while ago, in the I word, the institution.
Yep.
And because that is a perception a lot of people have of retirement communities. In fact, you'll hear people say, "Oh, you run nursing homes," and I've said for
it probably makes the hair go back on
the hair on the back of my neck stands up. And I've said for as long as I can remember, it's not nursing homes.
Right.
It's the retirement communities where people live. I work in their home.
You make their lives special, and I can tell you that from personal experience. And I'm going to back up and talk about the first time that I was there. But the other day when I was in Allen, there was a couple, and they were playing some games, and just as we're walking, of course, and this is one of these where they have, obviously have a few memory issues, and I'm sure this helps them. It gives them things to do that keeps their mind working, right. And I understand that. But the lady, Karen, and I guess the marketing person over there, Carol's awesome, by the way. So let's a shout out to Carol. If she sees this, I'm assuming she will see it. If she doesn't see it today, it'll be available on this Facebook page and then YouTube. We have a YouTube site as well as Real Communications. So I mean, this is going to be out here forever, right? So shout out.
Thank you.
But she was great about giving them hugs. They wanted hugs, and people need hugs. Mm-hmm. And I think when we go back to the I word and to that mentality of nursing homes, it's almost cruel. That's what I remember. That's what I remember as a kid going to.
It's a place where
and I was going
dumped.
to a nursing home because that's what we called them back in the 60s and 70s. And I just remember as a child, it really kind of messes your head up because you see that this is potentially what you're going to live like someday. And it doesn't have to be that way. No. And I'll go ahead and say it now, and I'll repeat it before the show's over, is that if someone is interested, and we'll give them all your information and where to go, but I personally highly recommend that if you have interest in the community and the services that you offer, that people do exactly what you say. Look into it now. See what your options are. In Allen, you have limited space. You don't have a lot of space. And, but you have some vacancies. And I got to tour. I got to look at the rooms that were available. And that's when I went, this may be better than where I live right now. So I would highly recommend that they look into it. Now, going back to 4 or 5 years ago when I first got involved, the facility was had some dated areas. And so we set about goals to raise money. And so that was kind of my front end on this, was being involved in the remodel and updating the rooms. And our fundraiser really was built around a visual of people helping to where they knew that their money, one thing I've learned about fundraising over the years, and I've only been doing it for 35, 40 years, is that people love a visual of what they're doing to contribute. And there's some people that just have the ability to stroke a check, and they just trust you to do the right thing, maximize my donation or my gift, my pledge, whatever. And I'm going to touch on that in a minute too. But the first couple of years that I was involved, we were literally redoing rooms, from the paint to the beds, to the lights, to the curtains,
in the
cabinets,
courtyard, yes,
and the courtyard, and that was attractive to me. It made me feel like I was. Don't misunderstand. I don't mean wasting my time, but let's say better investing my time, sure. And that's why I like the group. That's why I've been involved in it, and they've had a great team in the past, that have worked real hard, and everybody has their style. Everybody has their way. Everybody has their vision of what they think is the best way to improve things. You coming on this last year, I think is terrific. And I want to talk about you just a little bit. I want people to know who you are, and I want to talk about what you've done in the past, because our past does reflect what our future is going to be. And you've got some pretty powerhouse people that you've worked with that have made huge differences in tens of thousands of lives, not only here in North Texas but other places, because I know of whom we speak. So let's talk about Sabrina Porter and where did you grow up?
I grew up in Bernie, little town outside of San Antonio.
Bernie, Texas.
Bernie, Texas. I grew up there for about 13 years, and then I left my home when I was 13 years old and went out on my own because I was working and making $1.25 an hour as a nurse aide, and I thought that was just...
living large.
Oh, that was great. Almost dropped out of school, and I had the fortune of having a mother who knew how to influence some decisions, and they worked around my schedule at the nursing community that I worked at as a nurse aide. So it took me about 3 years longer to finish high school, but I did.
So when you lived in, how long did you live in Bernie?
13 years.
13 years in Bernie, and I know Bernie very well. It's really funny that you mentioned Bernie, Texas. We actually have an office in Bernie for our United Country Real Estate Company, but back in the 80s, a lot of people know that I used to sell Western Auto stores. I always have a story about a Western Auto store, and I auctioned off the Bernie Western Auto, and the gentleman that owned it, he and his wife, he was an administrator of the hospital in San Antonio. And so I got to know them very well, and they were successful. But they had bought this franchise, and they just liked having it. They probably didn't need it; they just liked having it. And but a good friend of ours, who's an auctioneer down in Bernie, Texas, named Forrest Meadows, he texted me this morning to check on me and my voice this morning from Bernie. So, and he's also I think, and Forrest, if I get this wrong, because he'll be watching this. But I believe he's a constable as well, and has been for quite some time down there. So he has dual roles. He's a super community guy. But Bernie, Texas is a very important part of my life. And, of course, it's only 20, 30 minutes into San Antonio, depending on the traffic.
It's kind of like a Frisco to Dallas.
It is. It's exactly that now.
It didn't used to be that way.
So when you left Bernie, where did you go?
San Antonio.
Okay.
And I went to work for a big for-profit organization. I didn't know the difference of for-profit and not-for-profit. But that's what I did for the next 19 years. And this organization just took me under their wing and raised me. And so I always tell people that's where I learned, and my business acumen was from this big for-profit organization that kept sending me to school, certification for an activity director, and then a licensed administrator, and then a regional vice president. So those 19.
So they built your foundation. I want to back
Absolutely.
up. I want to back up a little bit. We'll come back.
Okay.
Let's talk about your childhood.
Yeah.
I find our total biography far more interesting when you kind of see the pieces. So you're in Bernie.
Right.
I assume you had a family situation.
Well,
Tell
I did.
Tell me about your parents.
I did. Well, I always tell people, their past does not define them. However, they can make that past benefit them. It can be a blessing.
Sure.
And we know that it can be, and it was in my case. I'm a survivor of incest,
Mm-hmm.
and my stepfather, but I didn't know he was my stepfather. Thought he was my father for 7 years, and that's why I left when I was 13 to get out of the house.
Now, see, that makes even more sense.
So survived, and I've helped several girls and young women over the years. When I finally gave my testimony,
Mm-hmm.
took years to realize that I didn't do anything to cause what happened.
Yep.
And,
You're just taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Did you have any siblings?
I have a sister that's a year younger and a brother who is 10 years younger.
So where do they live?
Brother lives in Bernie, has a bike shop. Owns a bike shop there
Shout
in
out
Bernie.
to the bike shop.
Yeah, he's just 10 years younger, so he's 46.
I started to say, so he's 20.
Yeah, he's 20.
He's 20.
That's right.
Go
you
with
got
this.
it.
Go
You
with
got
this.
it.
I know what I'm doing.
And then my sister lives in Baton Rouge.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
What's she do?
She has always been a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
So one of the
So
hardest,
the hardest jobs and the most underpaid jobs ever.
One of the hardest. I
Yeah.
tried it for 5 years, and I really didn't do it full time because it was hard. And
and it's getting harder.
it is. And so I always tell people when girls are come to me, or young women are coming to me and they're at work and they say, how do you do this? How do you juggle both? It is tough.
Mm-hmm.
And in our industry,
Yep.
that's what you see is a lot of single moms.
Yep.
A lot of
yeah.
single moms. So big shout out to them.
Yeah.
Admire them. Respect them for what they do in raising their families
Sure.
because it's hard. It's
Well,
hard to do.
and you see that a lot in all families. I have my daughter, Mackenzie, and she's 26. And she's kind of in that situation where she's trying to find exactly where she wants to be. She's finding healthcare interesting. That's what she's doing. I tried my best to rope her into the auction in the real estate business. And, she was told that, well, that was your dad's dream. That's not your dream. So she's finding her way.
Well, I highly recommend healthcare.
I know you do. But I support her in whatever she wants to do because I'll be proud of her no matter what she does. And, we've got a little 5-year-old grandson who I woke up to this morning, and it was he is a blessing, like I can't explain.
Can't describe it.
And he's the only one, and so I just have those two, and but they change your world. They rock your world.
Your priorities in life. They changed mine.
Mm-hmm.
So I married at a very, very young age somebody much older, and that didn't last. That was not a good marriage. But then I met my husband,
Mm-hmm.
Joel, and he was a blind date.
And Joel's the man.
He's the man. Yeah,
I've seen the pictures in the office.
He's definitely the man. 26 years
Yep.
of marriage, and we've had 3 children.
Mm-hmm.
We're empty nesters. We're learning what empty nesting is all about. It's fun.
Yeah.
And so our oldest daughter, she graduated a couple of years ago from ACU
Yep.
with a social work degree, but she decided to go back to school for nursing. So the Baylor School of Nursing.
Oh, very nice.
Is what she is. But you're talking about your daughter and how you give them choices.
Mm-hmm.
When my daughter's decided she's not going to specialize in,
What?
Right now, she's always volunteered and worked in the communities, the 3 places I've been.
And she's not going down that
She
path?
doesn't want to do that first. She wants to experience all these
See the other
things
options?
and come around and then be a part of bringing the kids and the young adults, children into our industry.
I think that's smart. I think the other thing, too, people don't understand today that, kids get a bad rap.
Especially
general.
millennials.
In general. They just really do. And I think it's usually older people that don't understand, and don't want to understand. I meet so many great young people that are givers, that give more than a lot of my generation and the one before that, even though they get, the greatest generation gets a lot of credit. And then, of course, the baby boomers, which I'm one of those, we do give a lot. We do. But there's also, there's enough to go around. You get the good ones and you get the ones that are less compassionate and really it's just about them. There's just as many people of my generation that it's just about them as there are millennials. The millennials simply, they haven't even had a chance to experience life yet. We don't know what they're going to do. But when you look at the Bill Gates of the world and the Warren Buffetts and what their succession plans are and the money that they're giving away. And, you worked with another organization prior to this, so I'm going to transition just a little bit. Okay. So you spent 19 years with this other healthcare organization. They helped build you a platform and a knowledge base and opportunity. Tell me a little bit about what you did after that.
Well, so I can't tell you about that until I tell you about 3 children I had, all within a span of about 4.5 years. So I have 2 boys, and my oldest is in Special Forces, and he is deployed right now, and Mason, and then Caleb, my youngest, the baby, 6'4" baby.
Little boy.
And he's in the Old Guard in D.C.
Right.
And so I had these 3 children, and my husband worked for TXU, Encore at the time. Sure. And I wanted to work. I wanted to do what I felt was my calling.
Yep.
And not that being a mother wasn't a calling, because that was just as important, if not more, responsibility for these 3 young children. And I asked my husband, if I went back to work full time, would you be willing to stay home? And he said, can I start tomorrow?
Yeah.
And he did.
You picked the right guy.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
That's awesome.
And so he stayed home with our children. And
how long did that? How long was that?
That was back in 1999.
Okay.
And that's when I discovered the world of not-for-profit faith-based.
Okay.
Because I learned about this group called Grace Presbyterian Village. And we lived in North Dallas, and this was in Oak Cliff.
Right.
And they called me and said, would you come down and talk to us? And I said, where? And when I drove down there, the where didn't matter anymore. After about 45 minutes, I fell in love. I fell in love with the residents, with the staff. And what was key to this decision was my husband had to give 30 days notice. These people wanted somebody right away.
Yeah, like tomorrow.
And they said, well, bring your kids. And I did.
Wow.
It lasted more than 30 days because he ended up staying longer. And my kids grew up in that. And, they always had 300-400 grandma and grandpas.
So they received the benefits, actually the blessing. The blessing
Absolutely.
of being exposed to that atmosphere of giving and love and compassion.
Yes.
And then they became those people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they learned from that greatest generation, one man who became my father figure, who was in World War II. He was a prisoner of war and repatriated. They call him Grandpa Bob, and Bob Barton. He would have been 100 years old 1 month before he died.
Wow.
1 month before he would have been 100, he died. And he was their hero, and that's why they chose the military, because of his example.
Because of him.
And that's the example this greatest generation does give,
Yep.
All of us. So I worked there, and then I started taking care of somebody's mom, And this person worked for somebody I didn't even know because I didn't know the philanthropic world.
Sure.
I came from the for-profit where you're not allowed to do things like that, raise money for a ministry.
Yep.
And I didn't really know it was a ministry until I met my husband and found God. But I have to say that this woman, I took care of her mom for years. She worked for an influential man, T. Boone Pickens. And he was philanthropic.
Probably one of the most philanthropic people we've seen of this generation. When you look at the various, and it's not one group, it's lots of groups, and organizations and colleges and Oklahoma State University and the Boys and Girls Clubs, and I mean, you just ride around.
Cancer centers.
You can ride around. Yes, cancer centers. I'm very familiar with. You can ride around Dallas, Fort Worth. You can go to Tulsa, Oklahoma City, T. Boone and the Panhandle. T. Boone Pickens, of course, we just lost in the last 30 days or so, maybe 40. In fact, I don't know if you saw the letter that he left. Did you see the letter that he left?
So I was at the
I know you went to the service, but did you see the letter that he left that's been circulated throughout the internet?
I have not seen it, but I've heard about it.
Have you
seen it?
If you'll look on this show, on my Facebook page, it's posted there with his picture.
I'll read it.
Because it's a very well thought out. It's not short, but it was basically, he starts it out by basically saying, if you're reading this, I'm no longer here. So he gives his perspective.
So there was a piece of that on the program, on the back of his program at the service. What a man with work ethics.
Yes. So tell me about that relationship, and then about the center that you worked at and all that.
Well, it was just one community in Oak Cliff, and we wanted to start our own hospice. So we did, Faith Presbyterian Hospice, and we started that, and before I knew it, this lady named Marty, daughter of one of our residents, was asking me questions. And she saw the quality of care and the services that we provided there, and she just started asking more questions and saying, what do you need? What do you need there? And before I knew it, things were coming to us. Now, we had some strong donors at that point, but nothing like this. And I call her the angel behind Mr. Pickens, because she did a lot of his due diligence and made sure that where his resources were going were stable. And so then we merged. It was a merger, but it was really a takeover of Presbyterian Village North, and we took Presbyterian Village North under our umbrella.
Which was right off of
North Dallas.
It's in North Dallas.
Up near Forest and Walnut Hill, that area.
Well, I've been driving by that location for 30 years because that's the direction I go to my doctor, my voice doctor, bless Dr. Kirkham, and who I saw him last week. I'll be seeing him again this week because we're still working on me.
You need to work on you.
I need a lot of work, baby.
You need some rest.
I need a lot of work, not just in my voice. But I've driven by that center, and I was just looking at the sign. I pulled up, and I was looking at the sign, and I was thinking, because you and I had spoken about a week ago or two, and about T. Boone, and I saw the pictures of you and him in your office, and
what you saw was the T. Boone Hospice Center, the palliative care, because we asked if he would help us build the first hospice and palliative care center behind Medical City, and he did. So I'm talking about Presbyterian and who I worked for, because I was very loyal to them for almost 13 years. Never had plans on leaving those residents and my teammates. But somebody else approached me from another organization. But we're all in this together, all of these faith-based.
Sure.
I mean, they're faith-based not-for-profits, and there's not a lot of them in Texas.
Nope.
And there's about 13 of us who got together in 1999, 2000, and formed our own risk retention group. So we call each other, brother and sister, and not competitors.
Well, and most people know this. I work for a lot of faith-based groups. I actually prefer it. and that may be controversial to some people because, I just think you have to, you set your priorities. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to, I can do a lot of good work for a lot of people. I could do an auction every day. I literally could do an auction every day if that's what I choose to do. But I really want to be as good as I can be.
Intentional.
And with the right people that make me feel that it's mutual and there's an end to everyone, and I think we all try to do the best we can. I've never pretended to be something that I'm not, because I'm a failed human. I
believe that.
I'm a failed human being. But I hope that in the end, the good outweighs the bad. And so when I look at, and I'll give you another example, Christian Works, which is directly across the street, right behind me, past their building every day. Been with them almost 20 years as their auctioneer. And we always have someone from Christian Care Communities and Services at their event. And your group, in fact, Christian Works is the ones that recommended me to you guys before you ever came along. And so I was very pleased to spend the hour and a half or whatever we spent in your office the other day, because I could see the right light for this group. You're the right person at the right time to take them to another level. And
it's not just because we happen to be founded by the Churches of Christ doesn't mean that you have to belong to the Church of Christ,
sure,
to live there or work there. In fact, 33%, 40%, 35% at each of those communities are Church of Christ now because of the options that are out there.
Sure.
But it's important that we make sure that our residents and our teammates know when we say faith-based, it's faith-based. So that means we invite prayer.
Sure.
And so when we say we're going to think about something, we're going to pray about it. When we start meetings, we pray at those meetings. It's encouraged. It's our foundation. And so those are things that you can't buy, and we don't require that somebody be a certain denomination or even that they be a Christian.
Right.
But we can model that, his behavior. We model Christ. And over the years, I've seen so many people who have come to Christ because they see that. So Christian Works was founded by the Church of Christ. I'm very familiar with them in the adoption and foster and counseling. Yep. Oh, what a blessing they've been to so many people, and people I know as well. And
they've been on our show.
But they're separate from Christian Care Communities and Services who serve the elderly. My dream, my vision is for us all to be one someday, because we can do more intergenerational, not just volunteering, not just children coming for the day to volunteer, but families and children and young adults living in community.
Sure.
Because that's what they did for years.
Yep.
And we see that's the greatest quality of life. And that takes me to the next organization. Juliet Fowler Communities approached me back in 2011 and asked if I would come be their president and CEO. And then I didn't think I was going to leave where I was either, but a lot of prayer, a lot of discernment, and made that decision. And that was my first opportunity to bring children, bring youth into our communities, and we did. I worked with a Presbyterian group, Presbyterian Children's Homes and Services, and then I went to Ebby Halliday and asked her if she would let me name a building for girls, a home for girls who age out of foster care, so about ages 18 to 24. And she said, as long as you teach them skill sets. And I said, that's our goal. That's what we want to do. So we did that. Yeah. And we named that the Ebby House.
Ebby was a great friend of mine personally, and we talked about that a little bit the other day. I think that, and this goes out to anyone that's watching this that's either young or is looking for change or transition, improving their life. I sent a story out the other day to a lot of my friends privately about Colonel Sanders, Harlan Sanders. People don't realize that he didn't become a success until he was over 60. He had gone through bankruptcy. He tried to make it in the military. It didn't work. And he felt like everything he had tried to do was a failure. And he woke up one day and he was retirement age. And he was getting a check for like $120 a month. That was his retirement. And he was ready to commit suicide. People don't realize that. And it's in the story. But he didn't. He had this recipe, and he just started making chicken. And he started selling it to his neighbors. That's where it all started. So Kentucky Fried Chicken started by basically frying chicken at home, selling it to the neighbors, and then the rest is history. But I say that to say this: it's never too late for anyone to make a difference and do something that's satisfying and it can affect people in a very positive way.
You're absolutely right.
So it doesn't matter who you are. And so when we talk about the youth, you about the time you think it's all for nothing, that's when something happens. And I was getting back to Ebby, and whether it's T. Boone Pickens or Ebby Halliday or Ross Perot Jr. now, or someone of that nature, you have to surround yourself with successful people. You must surround yourself. That doesn't mean to become an elitist. It doesn't mean that they're the only people. I always like to talk about my grandfather, because my grandfather had a huge influence on me. He never had any money. It was never about money for him. He paid cash for just about everything. He paid for his house in 7 years, along with my grandmother. She worked all the time. He worked all the time. I was a latchkey kid. Only back then we used a skeleton key. And
a skeleton key?
A skeleton key could open any door in your hometown. It's the old-timey locks. So if you want to look, you can Google skeleton key. But people weren't really worried about people breaking in their houses.
Right.
They were just trying to keep the door closed and be able to have some sense of security. But it was never about that. Of course, it was probably different in Brooklyn, New York.
I'm sure it was.
But I was a latchkey kid, so you get out of school but I remember my grandfather very well. He liked everybody, and whether he was speaking, and he had some very godly tendencies. I'm not saying, and here again, he had his failings, like all of us do, like we all have. But whether he was introducing me to a banker or the poorest person in town, he treated them exactly the same. Mm-hmm. That's when I say a godly way. I looked at that as what Jesus would have done. Absolutely. Because there was a little man named Steve in our hometown, and he was a drunk. He was drunk all the time, and his clothes, he probably hadn't changed clothes in 15 years, and always had a scraggly beard and a little bitty diminutive man. But I never knew his whole history. I'd love to have known his life story. Could have been Jesus. You just don't know. And you're sitting there, but my grandfather would treat him and shake hands with him and introduce him to me like he was somebody, right, which made me feel that way. And so I've never felt like I was of privilege, even when I had a little bit of money. I think you show compassion to everyone.
That was a gift that Ebby had. You're about to say that. She taught me two things. One thing very important. First of all, whoever she was visiting with, she looked at them in the eyes and not around them.
Yep.
She didn't look for the next person or who was the important person in the room or who was what. She looked and she listened to that person, and she made them feel special. And really, everyone was her friend.
Yep.
She made everyone feel that way. And in the end, in the last couple of years, I took care of her for a while. My daughter did as well, did some things while she was in college, on college break. She wouldn't say no to people at the door.
Yeah.
She wanted to answer her door all
Yep.
the time because that's what you do.
Sure.
You answer your door. And it got to the point where it just wasn't good for her to be able to, to do that. But that's what she wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what she did in life. She answered the door.
Yeah. Well, and I actually did several training sessions about auctions in her office here, 5 minutes from here, where she officed.
Yeah.
And the thing I loved about her is she was very philanthropic. I mean, very philanthropic. A lot of people don't realize. They just don't know because she didn't tell everybody who she was helping. Mm-hmm. But I mean, when it came time for communities and schools, that was a group she was very passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Ross Perot had been chairman of their event. Ebby had been very, very involved in it. But any time I was the auctioneer, I mean, every single time, any event that I did in Dallas, Texas, where Ebby was involved, I would always get a personal card from her, saying the sweetest things ever. And I mentioned it the other day about Joe Hager.
Yes.
Former Mayor Pro Tem and the late patriarch of Hager menswear, clothing, and sportswear. He had the same effect on me, and as does still Doug Brooks. That was with Chili's, with Brinker. There's a commonality among all of these people that have, whether it was T. Boone or Joe Hager or Perot, they may not have had the same DNA exactly, but they knew what was most important. Right. And they knew how to connect people. And that's what you're going to do with Christian Care Communities and Services, because I see it, that you have that DNA and you have that connecting point that gets people to do things and raise the level of giving and support and growth. And I'm really excited about the future. But tell me more. We talked about Ebby a little bit. There's a reason why I have an autographed ukulele at my house.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
People know I collect guitars, but I have my Ebby ukulele.
Do you really?
I think I got the last one. And because Ebby was known. And the funny thing, when I did an auction for cancer, it was cancer. It had been Gilda's house. Yeah, Gilda's house, and it became the Red Door or something. And it was like Cancer Center of Dallas, I think may be the name of it. I've done several events for them, but when we opened Nebraska Furniture Mart and we had Warren come in and we had 3,000 people, at that event on a floor at Nebraska. They emptied an entire floor of furniture to make room for 3,000 chairs. And he drew a crowd, and forget about your politics. Sure. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, whatever. That's not what it was about. And we sold 10 or 12 items that were all Warren Buffett items, and they all brought $10,000 to $20,000 a piece. But here he comes out wearing a cowboy hat, wearing, of course, a hat made by one of his companies, but here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But then he plays the ukulele.
Oh, I didn't know he played the ukulele.
Yeah. So I thought, well, there you go. There's a connector to the early 1900s. You've got Ebby playing the ukulele. You got Warren Buffett playing the ukulele. I don't know what that means. Maybe they're up in heaven right now playing ukuleles together.
Probably are. They probably are.
And T. Boone sitting around watching. I don't know.
Or he's got a dog and he's hunting somewhere.
Yes.
He's doing something that
they
enjoy doing. She also taught a lot of other things, and her work ethics were strong. And she used to go into her office in her late 90s, all the way up to about 101.
Yeah.
From 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Oh, I'd see her because I'd go in for different things. Yeah. Well, and she drove as long as she could.
Yeah, and the other thing, that second thing she taught, and you mentioned it a minute ago, are those personal notes. She wrote personal notes. She didn't write, "It's great to see you, glad you came." She wrote a note.
She wrote a real note.
It was authentic, and that's important in the industry that I serve, is authenticity.
Well, I've never thrown a note away.
Yeah, they're
I found to be all that. I've written a lot of notes over the years, but not nearly as many as I should have. And there's notes I should have written that never got written. But I'm very appreciative. People may not get a note, but I hope they know that it's genuinely
I try to
loved.
do that. Try to do that for all my teammates.
So we talked about Ebby a little bit.
Yes.
And tell me something else.
So after we implemented some intergenerational things at Juliet Fowler, and we had been working on a succession plan, and my CFO, she was my CFO and my COO. Not a lot of people see that in the same person, but you can't fight with yourself. And so those CFOs and COOs do a lot of no, yes, no, yes. Well, you can't have tug of war with yourself, and she was absolutely a dynamite CFO and COO. And so when Christian Care approached me, when the board approached me, after a couple of calls, because again, I wasn't looking for a change, after some praying and knowing that succession plan we had put in place, it works. If you do it right, you're building and you're growing your own leaders amongst in your organizations, your ministries. So she stepped into my place as president and CEO at Fowler.
Which freed you up.
And so
allowed you to
came over to Christian Care. And that's where I've been since August. It was a year in August.
You know, also too, and I'm a believer in this, I think in a lot of roles, whether you're on a board or whatever, you know, your shelf life, your strong shelf life is limited because your new ideas are used up. And I just retired from being on a series of boards with the National Auctioneer Association and the National Auctioneers Foundation, and I just retired from the foundation board in July after 21 years. I've been on a board for 21 years. Long time. And I've said all along, and they've kept me around probably longer than they should have. But, you know, if you're contributing, you know, they like to keep you around, you know, because you are vital to it. But I also believe that at some point, after about 5, 6, 7 years, you become too much like furniture. You've got to get fresh blood in. You've got to bring new people in. You have to have new perspectives. You have to have different education, different things that bring something special to a board, whether you're the CEO, president, or you're just a board member. Whatever that is, I just think that at a certain point, you should get off the bus. I personally believe that, and this is a philosophy that we have in our company. Our CEO, when he came on board and put the purchase group together to buy United Country Real Estate, we said very early on, and he said, you know, every year we're going to look at who's on the bus. And he said, that includes me. And we're all getting off the bus, and we're going to figure out who needs to be on the bus and who shouldn't be on the bus. And I think that forward thinking is important.
That's very important. And we say you should, you know, hire somebody that you know knows more than you do, can do a good job, and can take your place.
That's right.
And that's what succession planning is all about.
What you want is that when there's it's like water. It's like putting your finger in water. You want that ripple to be very limited. You need a smooth transition. You don't need it to be a big splash to where everybody freaks out, you know?
Right.
So we have some interesting material that I think that Trelvis has. Trelvis, you want to show us some photographs and some information about Christian Care Communities and Services, please, sir.
Oh, that's our new, we call it our benevolent fund, the Army of Care. And so we just established that in the last year. And these are my teammates. So some life enrichment activity and nurse aides and housekeepers, maintenance, marketing. Everybody wears their Army of Care shirts and blue jeans on Fridays. And the Army of Care is a way of giving for our teammates and others to give back, to pay it forward. It's amazing. Some of these teammates who make little and give so much. They give their 2 pennies out of their 3, if that makes sense. They not only work in this industry and have the hearts and the compassion for the residents we serve, but they also pay it forward in giving of their own resources, and that's important. So that's what you saw was the teammates in the Army of Care.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that your organization has a great love for our veterans.
Oh, yes.
And I saw that on display in Allen. You have a wall
Wall of Honor.
Dedicated to the residents that have been there and are there. And all the branches of the military are represented.
Yes.
I took a photograph, and Travis, I wish I had it for you. I wish I had sent it. I took a great picture of the wall because the wall shows the residents in probably physically better times for them,
yes.
and it's when they're actually serving the country. And everybody knows I'm very
patriotic.
I like to believe I'm very patriotic, and I like to believe that I stand for America and what these people fought for. I think if we had more people like that, I think this country would be a much better place today. And but these people are awesome, and I enjoyed one of the things I really enjoyed at the care centers is you have the shadow boxes in front of their rooms that show pictures and shows family and shows mementos from their life, things that mattered to them.
Right.
So it's really kind of cool because you see it's not just a little cool, it's very cool.
It serves a purpose of reminders for those who might have some cognitive deficits, if they have some memory issues. It's the picture when they got married that they recognize that's me.
Yep.
And then that's my room, or that's my apartment. And the other things you saw were the Passions Project that we did with our residents. And we had a photographer come in and interview and take pictures and video of them, of their passion. So some of these residents were dancers, they loved to dance. Some of them were teachers, play the piano.
Vital lives. I mean,
all about their
vibrant,
lives.
very vibrant
their stories.
lives. They have great stories.
And we blow those up huge on canvas and put them all around our communities because we honor them as well. So we honor our veterans and we honor our residents who live with us. We're looking for ways to reach out and meet the needs that aren't being met. And one of our visions is to meet the needs for IDD, for anybody who is experiencing that. And I don't know if you know this, but the same plaques that are in the brain for somebody with dementia are the same plaques that are in the brain with somebody who has Down syndrome.
Really?
So it's not will they have memory issues, it's when.
Gotcha.
And so many of the Down syndrome or autism or anybody on the spectrum, those adults who are living at home with their parents are concerned. What's going to happen?
Sure.
And there's places out there, but many of them are very expensive.
Sure.
And not everybody has those resources.
Well, and you are in the, I don't use the word business, but
industry.
You are in the industry, but you're not trying to satisfy the highest, most expensive.
No.
You really do work at fulfilling the middle of the road and the people less served and the ones that need your help the most. And you help them not just with the care, but also seeing that they get the care.
Oh, absolutely. And so helping them, and we're required, all not-for-profit faith-based organizations are required to give 4% of their revenues back. We don't limit ourselves. There's been many years we've given 7, 8, 9. Our goal is 10%. And that's for those people whose resources are limited, or they've been paying privately for so many years and they're running out.
Sure.
But we have some land at our Mesquite and our Fort Worth communities that is undeveloped.
I was looking at that.
And so that's what I'm thinking of, some intergenerational cottages, or Fort Worth, a farming community. We have a big barn, sits on top of the hill and overlooks all of Fort Worth, and adult day services for young adults that are on the spectrum somewhere to senior adults, and serving each other.
Where's the best research being done right now for memory care? Is there something?
Well, I don't know if you've heard of the Center for Brain Health here in Dallas. So Dr. Chapman is in charge of that. She does a lot of research. There's so many people who do research, and there's not a magic pill.
Right.
And so we're always looking for something. It's human nature
Sure.
to look for something to fix it.
Yep.
But what we know is that if we can keep the brain and the body active, it can slow down the progression.
Yep.
And so that's our goal always, is to do wellness and fitness, and that's what we provide. So when you
I saw the exercise room.
Yes.
Our
pools, our therapy.
Yep.
We do outpatient therapy, not just in our communities, but externally. And then we have hospice and home health as well.
Sure. And
in that, we train our teammates on dementia and all of anything that might impact our residents. All of our teammates are trained in those areas.
Besides the taking care of them to the best of your ability, but there's also safety issues, security issues, all these things that blend together. You've got your plate's pretty big. So I want to talk about the Festival of Trees before we close out. This will be the last thing that we really get to talk about, because we've gone an hour. It's went by pretty quick, didn't it?
Yes.
So would you like to just tell us about the Festival of Trees?
Sure.
And we'd like to invite people to.
Yeah. So you were talking a while ago about new and fresh ideas, but it's very important to me to also honor the past, because many of the events or programs that were put in place in the past are honorable. And so it's always my goal to look for those ways of continuing to honor those and bringing in new, fresh ways, and not taking or asking from the same people. Because that's hard on your donor base.
Yep.
For you to go to them, ask the same, that 80-20, 80% rule,
Yep.
And
I know it very, very well.
So the Festival of Trees is something that was started 11 years ago. And in fact, we are honoring the person who really spearheaded that. Her name's Teresa Scott. And she was
Teresa Scott's the one that brought me on board.
She did, Chief Advancement Officer for many years. And she and her husband have been in the ministry. John Scott was a minister for many years at some churches. And she just recently retired. Mm-hmm. So she doesn't know this yet, unless she's watching this, which I hope she's not.
The word's probably getting out.
So we're honoring her for
that. If you know Teresa and,
don't
and
say
you're
anything.
Watching this right now,
please don't say anything.
Just be quiet about it. It's all good. God's watching, so be good.
So we're going to honor her at the Festival of Trees on November 11th,
mm-hmm.
that we have every year it's been at the Westin Galleria, but there's a limit of 500 people. So next year will be our first year. We'll have it at the Renaissance
mm-hmm.
in Dallas, because they can hold 1,000.
Right.
And I expect that as we move along each year, there will be more people who want to come to that. And it's a dinner, and we also have a live auction. Many people have underwritten trips and experiences mm-hmm. and items, and we also, as you know, we do something special, Fund a Need.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a couple of very, very important needs this year that we'll be asking for people to discern about.
So people that know me, they see people that are close to me see my Facebook pages and what I'm doing and where I am and who I'm with and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the past with the Festival of Trees, we've had some entertainment. We've had Amy Grant a few years back.
Mercy Me.
You've had Lee Greenwood, I believe, last year.
I
missed that one. But tell us about this year's, because I've seen the video of this group. I honestly had never heard of them, and now I'm addicted to their music. And just tell us about this group.
Sure. So I again give Teresa Scott the kudos for that, for finding them. The Annie Moses Band, and their siblings whose grandmother had dementia. They have a story, but we'll tell that story at the event.
Sure.
And they play the violins, the piano. They're siblings,
mm-hmm.
and they are absolutely
They're over the top.
Gifted.
They're over the top.
Just beautiful.
I see a lot of entertainment. I'm working with several famous people this weekend here in Dallas, and I'll just tell you, compelling music. There's a reason music works. There's just something about music that gets people together, that draws passion, and these musicians are phenomenal. I can tell you, whether you can make it to this year's event or not, you should check them out anyway. Get on their website. I'm sure you can Google them. They're there. And watch some of their YouTube video and stuff. I can't wait personally. I can't always stay after an event, but I'm staying for this one.
I'm glad you're doing that.
And I appreciate that invitation.
They have some special songs they'll be singing, and you say music does it just soothes the soul, but it's also one thing that is a constant for our residents with Alzheimer's, with dementia.
Yep.
They might not remember how to say your name, but you start playing a hymn and they know every word, the entire song.
Yep.
It is, what's a cure? For a moment in time, it's a cure.
There's a reason why we call it a music ministry.
Because it is.
Because it is. I have a really good friend that's with a church in the Panhandle, and he left here, a very successful young man, to head up a ministry with a church. And then his father has since become a really close friend of mine, and he's 80 years old plus, and now he plays the piano, and he also plays at Presbyterian Hospital for the elderly folks over there. So there's a commonality there that I just think mends and brings people together and helps.
Absolutely. There's something called Dementia Friendly. It's an organization, Dementia Friendly America. Well, we partnered with them, Dementia Friendly Fort Worth and Dementia Friendly Dallas, Dementia Friendly Allen. And it's a way of educating the public, going into the grocery stores and educating the teller on what to do when somebody looks at them, comes to the register and forgets
Confused.
what to do. Or maybe looks like they might be taken advantage of in the bank by somebody, or doesn't know how to find their car. So we're a part of that, educating the public. But we have a speaker this year. I don't know if you know her, Mike. Her name is Sarah Bearden, and she's an author of a book called Broken Beauty. And that's what her children call their Nana, her mother, Beauty, who was diagnosed with early onset dementia when she was 52 years old.
Wow.
And so she wrote a book, but what she's going to speak about for just a few minutes is how she finds that she and her daddy find the joy in life, help their mama, help Beauty find joy every day in the disease.
Right.
Find the joy and not the sorrow. So she'll speak a little bit about that as well. I'm eager for people to hear her.
It's good. That'll be a great story. I'm looking forward to that. Sabrina, tell me, as we wrap up, contact information for your centers and the residents. Just give us, if someone wanted to get a hold of your office or just learn more about Christian Care Communities and Services, where would they go?
So you can go on our website, and since we rebranded last year, it's Christian Care Communities and Services, but you'll also find Christian Care Centers and the website. But my number is 972-686-488. I'm sorry, 686-2448.
Okay. I'm going to let you say all of that one more time. So if they want to go to your website, it's
Christian Care Communities and Services.org.
Okay, .org. Remember that. A lot of people just automatically put in .com because it's the normal thing to do, but it is .org.
And there's a .net.
Yep.
And then my number, 972-686-2448.
Well, Sabrina Porter, you said it all. You said it well. You're a beacon of good things for this organization, and you're going to be for a good while, as long as you want to, I'm sure. And I hope they embrace you 120%.
Oh, they have.
And you continue to bless as many people as you can, as long as you're in the role. And I'll be there with you on November the 11th, which is originally Armistice Day, and then Veterans Day, and my mother's birthday. So,
wonderful.
So I'll be celebrating you and all of those good things. So
that'll be great to celebrate with you.
Thank you very much for being here with me.
Thank you for having me.
And Trelvis, I think with that, we're going to wrap this one up. And you've got our closing. Are you going to close this thing? Yeah, push that button over there, Travis. Travis is the producer. I never tell Travis what to do.
TR Elvis.
TR Elvis. On behalf of everybody at the Mike Mcgavel Jones Show and everyone that's been a part of this today from Dallas, Texas, and Lincoln Center at the Quarter, the center of the world, at the Dallas Tollway, and, of course, the LBJ Freeway. Have a blessed week, everybody. We look forward to seeing you next week, and we'll have another show for you, and hopefully it'll be as good as this one right here. Thank you very much. Okay.